am going to discuss the profound connection between my best companion, Mark the Great Dane. The residence was devoid of noise on that particular day. Mark and I were the only ones present as my parents were absent. However, this tranquility was merely a superficial silence. The relationship between Mark and me was anything but tranquil that day. This is the narrative of our profound bond, the intricate emotions, and the maturation process. On that particular day, the residence was exceedingly tranquil. Mark and I were the only ones present, as my parents were elsewhere. I had been lying on the settee for an extended period of time, gazing indifferently at the television screen, which was currently broadcasting a comedy. The surroundings were so tranquil that I would be content with the fleeting images that appeared before me. Mark abruptly rose from his seat, his eyes alight with an unusually intense gleam, as if the realization of a concept were a critical mishap. He hurried to the main door, motionless, as he darted into the realm of explanations. Softly and silently I detected a click. Mark had locked the door and was slowly rotating around, his eyes becoming heavier with an unnameable vigor. He then moved quickly to approach me before I could realize what was happening. Mark charged at me without providing me with an opportunity to respond. The space appeared to be constricting and time appeared to be frozen. I was astonished and inert. Subsequently, all of this transpired within a single instant, which transcended all boundaries. I was aware that the events that transpired would have a lasting impact on my life. Hello, I am Emma, a young woman who has recently reached the age of 18 and resides in a small family as the sole child. My parents lavish me with affection and tenderness. They consistently provide me with the highest quality items and provide encouragement for my personal pursuits. I am most passionate about rearing pets, particularly beautiful dogs, among those interests. When I was 18 years old, my passionate relationship with canines began. In that period, I primarily viewed animal television programs, and I was consistently captivated by the sight of adorable, loyal canines. For an extended period, I implored my parents to acquire me a companion. Eventually, my parents consented and escorted me to the stable to select a four-legged companion as my mate. Upon entering the kennel, I was inundated by the tranquility of the canines. However, there was one particular dog that promptly caught my attention out of all of them. He possessed an impressively long body, gentle irises, and silky fur. The Great Dane, despite its reputation as a large dog, was a charming and naive puppy. I immediately sensed a unique bond with this creature. I did not hesitate to select him as my new acquaintance. Initially, my parents were taken aback by my decision. They were apprehensive that a dog of the girth of a Great Dane might be challenging to manage. However, I was convinced of this dog's worth and affection. We brought him home and named him Mark. My initial days with Mark were genuinely unforgettable. He both loved and was wicked. Mark was exceedingly intelligent and rapidly acquired fundamental commands, including wait, stand, and sit. We developed a close friendship as we shared every moment, from strolling through the park to spending time in solitude. Mark experienced rapid growth as time progressed. He transformed into a large dog, who was still compassionate and honest, despite his height. Mark is not merely a pet. He is also a significant member of the family when I am feeling stressed or depressed. Mark's adorable licks and gentle gaze will always provide me with solace. Mark is not merely a canine to me. He is a friend, a companion, and a testament to his unconditional affection for both humans and animals. I have acquired the ability to appreciate the basic moments of life, be responsible, and be patient as a result of Mark's guidance. I am of the opinion that each individual requires a unique friend such as Mark in their life, who will adore them unconditionally and never abandon them, regardless of their identity or location. I have always believed that Mark and I would be inseparable and lead a tranquil existence. However, an unforeseen event transpired when I was 20 years old, which significantly altered the relationship between Mark and me. It is a gorgeous Sunday morning, as is customary. Mark and I took a stroll through the park that is situated in close proximity to our residence. Mark enjoys strolling in this manner. He ran about, inhaled fresh air, and occasionally I would pause to observe the birds flying or to scent the flowering bushes. I was consistently satisfied and joyful during these occasions. Mark and I began our typical Sunday morning by walking through the park, relishing the simple delights of life with my dear friend by my side. The dog was ecstatic, bouncing, and sniffing the delightful environment. Then an unusual event transpired. Mark abruptly halted upon hearing a noise and focused his attention on a dog that was situated at a distance. It was a female Great Dane, as golden as sunlight, and as majestic in stature and motion. Mark was drawn to her by an invisible gravitational force as he gazed at her. His tail was wagging fiercely, and his limbs were kicking off at an alarming pace that I was unable to react in time. I firmly grasped Mark's neck, and it appeared as though I had imposed my entire weight on him. However, his immense strength rendered it irrelevant. He transported me for a considerable distance, resulting in my near fall and subsequent stagger. I shouted Mark's name at a high volume, but nothing appeared to transpire. He has just begun to advance toward the other dog. My heart was racing wildly, as if the evidence in the world had demonstrated that he had become affiliated with love at first sight. I was unsure of what to do with this information. I shouted, "Mark, stop," in a moment of desperation. It was so loud that it caused Mark to flinch. He halted and spun, gazing at me with a look of bewilderment and remorse. I was only able to perceive the genuine sadness on his countenance at that point. He gazed at the ground, and his ears drooped as if he comprehended my sorrow over his actions. I was compelled to delicately remove his leash and transport him to his residence. While returning, I detected an unearthly quality in Mark's demeanor. He would no longer be able to freely roam and wave his tail with joy. Instead, he would walk slowly and quietly beside me. My chest was filled with an indescribable sensation. I was deeply regretful for Mark and felt guilty for having reprimanded him. However, my greatest concern was whether our friendship would remain the same in the future. Mark lay down in a calm corner of the room that evening, his eyes gazing out into the distance. It is possible that he was still contemplating the exceptional Dane with whom he had interacted earlier that morning. I approached Mark and gingerly petted his soft fur, whispering, "Mark, I will love you forever, regardless of the circumstances. However, it is crucial that you pay attention to my advice." Mark raised his head and gazed at me, his eyes gleaming as if to convey that he had. The faith that nothing would separate us remained in my heart, and a faint smile appeared on my face. As the evening approached, I, as is customary, snuggled up with Mark. Mark was used to snuggling up next to me. I had consistently experienced tranquility as a result of his deliberate respiration. I always caressed his silken fur before I went to sleep, stroking his back. However, Mark let out a small moan as if he felt something peculiar when I inadvertently touched a specific location. I was startled by the gentle moan. However, Mark persisted in his apparent state of repose. I gingerly withdrew my hand. I experienced an abrupt increase in my heart rate. I experienced a peculiar sensation during that brief period, which was a combination of surprise and confusion. I maintained my position, gazing upward at the ceiling in the soft glow of the nightlight. Random thoughts were currently circulating in my mind, which caused me to become restless. This was surely not the first instance of a unique sense of intimacy between Mark and me. However, the sensation was now quite peculiar. The new dynamic was leaving me in a state of contemplation as I attempted to make sense of it for both of us, and my curiosity was taking a significant toll on my emotions. As the evening progressed, I developed a growing suspicion that something had changed between them. I suspected that Mark's previous actions as well as my own reactions had unlocked emotions that had not been fully explored. The connection between us appeared to be more intricate and profound, and we would jointly confront any challenges that may arise. Mark was already awake the following morning, gazing at me with a combination of loyalty and a newfound understanding. It is possible that I smiled at him with a renewed sense of purpose. One murmured, "Good morning, Mark," as I fluffed his fur. "Okay, today is going to be an amazing day." Mark gingerly waggled his tail, seemingly concurring with my assertion. "I am confident that our relationship is stronger than ever as we commence our day, and we will confront any obstacles that may arise together." I gradually rose from the bed and examined my surroundings. In front of me, a stake is situated on the ground. Upon witnessing that, I experienced an ineffable combination of joy and anxiety in my heart. I gingerly sat up, my heart pounding with anxiety as I gazed at the tree. The mind gradually extended its reach as if it were in control of something. It appeared to be both enigmatic and warm. Mark trembled slightly each time I touched it. Eventually, a substance adhered to my hand and eventually oozed out. I gazed upward at Mark, who was still slumber, and I was hesitant to disturb him. I gingerly placed him on the bed and embraced him. I was unable to fall asleep immediately that evening. There was still a peculiar sense of excitement and emotion in my consciousness, as if a new door had opened between me and Mark. I did not anticipate that Mark's instinctive response would result in a more profound and unique sense of connection than it already did. He was a complex human being with emotions and behaviors that required time to comprehend. In addition to being a loyal companion, I experienced an unusual sensation that evening, which is difficult to articulate. I experience an instantaneous increase in my heart rate whenever I gaze upon Mark. In the interim, the fiery pulse was now throbbing at an even faster pace. Rather than viewing Mark as a mere dog or acquaintance, I regard him in a more profound and unique manner. The sensation left me feeling both exhilarated and perplexed, as I contemplated the precise nature of my internal state. Mark also appeared to observe a distinction in me. His irises were distinct each time I observed him. "Be more considerate. They appear more gentle." It appears as though he is endeavoring to comprehend my thoughts. At times I observed Mark gazing at me for extended periods. His vibrant eyes were brimming with an emotion that I was unable to identify. Our relationship is already profound. Currently, it appears to have been repurposed with a newfound significance. The sunlight was gently reflecting off the trees adjacent to me as Mark and I sat on the lawn one afternoon. Mark's eyes were partially closed as he rested his head on my thigh, as if he were savoring the tranquility of the moment. I reached out and caressed Mark's smooth fur, absorbing the warmth that emanated from it. However, this time I experienced a sensation similar to that of an electric current coursing through my body, rather than the typical perception. A peculiar sensation overtook me as a result of that straightforward connection. For an extended period, I stooped to glance at Mark. He awoke, his large brown eyes gleaming with an unusual sense of foreknowledge. At that moment, it appeared as though he was conveying information that neither of us could articulate verbally, but we were both cognizant of its comprehension. Mark's gaze bewildered me, yet it simultaneously evoked an unusual sensation of tenderness. Everything was going well until one day when it all went awry. Mark and I were the only ones at home that day, as my parents were absent for the entirety of the day. The house was now silent. A silence that was unfamiliar, despite the fact that it was always alive with mirth and warmth. Mark and I were the only ones in that vast expanse. The breath had a peculiar effect on me, evoking a sense of excitement and peculiarity, as if something was about to transpire. Mark's eyes were fixed on my every movement as he reclined beside me. It appeared as though he could almost perceive the peculiarity of the ambience that day. I was unaware of the reason for my internal turmoil. However, it appeared as though they were perpetually anticipating something, despite Mark's consistently empathetic and gentle gaze. The house was now completely silent, with the sole sound emanating from the clocks chiming. Mark and I were seated in the living room, observing the wavering light on the screen from a comedy film. We were enveloped in a serene environment, with our attention focused on the fleeting images that appeared before us. Mark abruptly rose from his seat, his eyes brimming with an unusual intensity, as if he had just come to a significant realization. He hastened toward the primary entrance without offering any explanation. Mark had secured the door, as evidenced by the gentle click I heard. He turned around, his irises heavy with an intense emotion that was difficult to identify. He then proceeded to walk toward me with great haste. Mark pounced on me before I could comprehend the situation, leaving me with no time to react. The space appeared to become increasingly dense with the weight of an indescribable force. Time appeared to halt, leaving the individual in a state of startled immobility. I experienced a sensation akin to being carried away by a cyclone that merged all barriers. Leaning comfortably into the sofa, I utilized it to take a deep inhale. Mark's head was lying on my knee and he was in close proximity to my feet. Mark's irises were illuminated by the TV's bright light. Mark abruptly rose from his seat, his eyes aglow with an unusual hue, as if he had recently come to a significant realization. He hastened toward the primary entrance without offering any explanation. While I continued to contemplate, a gentle clack was heard. The door had been secured by Mark. When he turned around, his eyes were fixed on an intense emotion that was difficult to articulate. He then proceeded to walk toward me with surprising speed. Mark sprung forward, pouncing upon me. Before I could comprehend the situation, he did not allow me to react. The environment appeared to be oppressive. The passage of time appeared to have concluded. I was taken aback and began to freeze. Suddenly, a force akin to a whirlwind swept over all the frontiers. I was rendered immobile by that abrupt sensation, rendering me incapable of responding. Time seemed to have halted. The increasing tension suffocated the space. The world around me began to dissolve into a mirage, with the exception of the rhythmic beat of my heart. The subsequent events were akin to a hurricane. It demolished all obstructions and distances. It was beyond my comprehension what had possessed Mark. I also was unaware of what to do at that time. However, I was certain of only one thing. I would be eternally changed by the events that had transpired. It was as though a door had been opened, and it would not close again. Mark and I were thereafter united by an intangible thread of emotion that is difficult to articulate, yet it continues to torment me to this day. We never discussed the events that had transpired. However, I was aware that we were contemplating it each time our eyes met. A tranquility prevailed, one secret between us, simmering in the tranquility of this residence. The subsequent occasion was considerably simpler. As if an agreement or understanding had been reached in silence, naturality had replaced it. Each time we entered the room, we were both aware of where to begin. Mark would approach me with force and gentleness as if to confirm that I was his while the door was closed. I cannot assert that I was entirely opposed to it, as a portion of me desired that sensation. A sensation that was both thrilling and apprehensive. I felt as though I had forgotten everything that was around me whenever Mark and I were together. I was overwhelmed by a torrent of emotions, which resulted in an internal explosion and distress. It was not solely physical interaction. Mark's presence seemed to affect every cell in my body. My heart rate increased. My respiration became more labored. Additionally, I was incapable of managing my body's responses. The strong pull that Mark had generated was the only thing that remained, as all anxiety and thoughts of consequences dissipated. I would sit and contemplate the queries in my mind when the room would become quiet again. I was aware that the situation was unjust. That my parents, who had consistently supported us, would never consent to it. However, I was unable to relinquish that sensation, that inexplicable sensation. It was comparable to an addiction, as it increased my fear and hunger. I maintained my silence regarding this matter and consistently maintained an ordinary demeanor in the presence of my parents. Deep within me, I was aware that this relationship would never be widely known. Mark and I were once again alone in the house as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow throughout the space. The house was silent, with the refrigerator's distant murmur serving as the sole source of sound. Mark's gaze intersected with mine. At that instant, I experienced an intense surge of emotion. He approached me at a leisurely pace. His strides were measured yet assured. The tension I sensed was intensifying. The air was dense with unspoken words. He approached me and inclined his head toward my hand. I never saw his eyes leave mine. It was a period of unadulterated connection, during which a silent understanding was established between us. I experienced a complex array of emotions, including remorse, excitement, and an unspoken, profound love in that serene and private location. Mark's presence was simultaneously overwhelming and comforting. It serves as a reminder of the intricate connection we share. I gingerly caressed his fur, savoring the sensation of his body against my own. At that instant, all of the world's concerns appeared to dissipate. In our private wildlife sanctuary, there were only two of us remaining. As the days progressed into weeks, our covert alliance intensified. Our relationship is further enriched by each shared glance and stolen moment. I am yearning for the moment when we are alone, when I can cease performing and be with Mark. The desire for it was insatiable, despite the fact that it was a perilous pastime that could be irreparably destroyed if it were discovered. Mark was considerably more than a mere companion. He was my closest companion, bodyguard, and in many respects, my soulmate. However, the burden of our secrecy had now begun to affect my heart in a significant way. It was as though every action we were taking was entirely inappropriate. The sensation was too intense and overwhelming to disregard, despite the fact that it contradicted everything I had been instructed. Even as I struggled with the guilt and the dread of discovery, I found comfort in the moments we shared. I was unable to halt as I walked a tightrope over the edge of a precipice. While I was observing Mark play in the yard one day, I came to the realization that our relationship was much more than a mere transient infatuation. It was, in fact, more than an unbreakable, eternal bond that no mortal or anyone else could ever sever. I will publish the second segment of the video if it receives 200 likes. Like what you heard. There's plenty more heartbreak and secrets to come. Hit like, subscribe, and stay curious with Tangled Truths.